You have tried to feel it. You have sat quietly, closed your eyes, and tried to reach for the feeling of having what you want. And what came instead was the awareness of not having it, the wanting, the gap, the hollow space between where you are and where you are trying to go. And the harder you reached for the feeling, the more that gap became visible, the more the absence announced itself. You tried again, you breathed deeper, you told yourself to relax into it, you picked a scene, you placed yourself inside it, and for a moment, sometimes just a flicker, something almost arrived, a warmth, a brief softening, and then your mind moved and the scene dissolved and you were back in the room, in your body, in the life that has not yet changed. And you wondered if you were doing it wrong, or if you simply were not capable of feeling what others seem to feel so easily. This is where most people stop. They decide they cannot do it. They decide they are not good at this. They decide the feeling of the wish fulfilled is something that comes naturally to others, but not to them. But that is not the problem. The problem is a misunderstanding of what the feeling of the wish fulfilled actually is. Because it is not what most people think it is. It is not a surge of emotion. It is not a wave of joy powerful enough to override what you currently feel. It is not excitement. It is not gratitude performed loudly enough that the subconscious finally hears. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is something so quiet, so simple, so utterly unremarkable, that most people walk right past it while looking for something more dramatic. And that is exactly what this is about. Not how to feel more. How to feel differently. How to recognize the specific quality of feeling that your subconscious actually responds to. Because the subconscious is not moved by intensity, it is moved by truth. And truth, to the subconscious, does not feel like a peak experience. It feels like ordinary life. Think about what happens when you sit down to feel the wish fulfilled. You close your eyes. You try to imagine having what you want, and what arises almost immediately is not the feeling of having it. It is the feeling of trying to feel like you have it. And those two things are completely different signals. One is a state, the other is a performance of a state. And the subconscious, which is listening to everything, can tell the difference instantly. It does not hear your intention. It does not reward your effort. It reads your felt signal. And if the felt signal underneath your visualization is the awareness of reaching, of wanting, of trying to cross a gap that still feels very real, then that is the instruction your subconscious receives, not the image in your mind. The feeling underneath the image. This is the part Neville Goddard understood, that almost no one teaching this material today explains clearly enough. He did not say, feel intense emotion about your desire. He did not say, generate excitement or gratitude or joy. He said, feel the wish fulfilled, already complete, already done, not in progress, not on its way, done. And a thing that is done does not feel exciting. Think about this carefully. Think about the difference between two experiences. The first is the day before you leave for a trip you have been planning for months. You cannot sleep. You keep checking your bags. You feel a brightness in your chest that follows you through the whole day. That is emotional intensity. That is the feeling of something arriving. Now think about 6 months after you move to the city you always dreamed of living in. You wake up, you make coffee. You look out the window at the streets you once imagined from a distance, and you feel nothing in particular. Not because you are ungrateful, not because the dream failed, but because it is yours now. It is simply your life. Ordinary, unannounced, unremarkable. You do not announce it to yourself every morning. You do not remind yourself to feel grateful that you live here. You do not check in with the feeling to see if it is still there. It is simply the water you swim in now. The background frequency of your ordinary days, and that is precisely the shift most people never make when they try to practice the feeling of the wish fulfilled. They keep returning to the excitement of the first feeling when the subconscious is waiting for the settledness of the second. That second feeling, that quiet, settled, completely undramatic sense of something simply being true, that is the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not the excitement of arrival, the normalcy of residence, and your subconscious responds to one of these signals and not the other. Excitement is a signal of wanting. It contains within it the very thing you are trying to release, the not yet, the almost, the still reaching. Excitement, however genuine, however beautiful, is the feeling of a person standing outside the door. Naturalness is the feeling of a person already inside. And the subconscious, which is always building the world that matches the signal you are living inside of, responds to naturalness the way it responds to every other established truth about your life. Without question, without resistance, without needing any additional proof. Think of a person who has lived in the same house for 20 years. They do not notice it anymore. They do not marvel at the way the light comes through the window in the late afternoon. They do not register the sound of the third stair or the particular way the front door closes. These things are invisible to them, not because the house is not real, but because it is so thoroughly theirs that the subconscious has long since stopped filing it under things to notice. It is simply home. That invisibility, that complete, unremarkable, unannounced familiarity. That is what ownership feels like inside the subconscious mind, and that is the exact quality of feeling that the wish fulfilled is asking you to find. Not a feeling you manufacture, not a feeling you reach for, a feeling you uncover, because the subconscious does not build a reality around a feeling of reaching. It cannot. A feeling of reaching contains its own contradiction. It signals that the thing is still out there, still ahead, still requiring effort to approach. And the subconscious, which organizes your entire experience around what it accepts as already established, cannot build something permanent out of a signal that is still moving toward it. It needs stillness. It needs arrival. It needs the kind of quiet, settled knowing that does not tremble when the outer world does not confirm it. Because underneath the wanting, underneath the reaching, underneath the gap that feels so wide when you are trying to visualize across it, there is something already there. A part of you that already knows what it feels like to be the version of you who has what you want, not as a future projection, as a present truth, and learning to access that part, to drop beneath the performance and find the quiet place where the wish is already complete, is what the rest of this is about. Here is the question that follows everything. If the feeling of the wish fulfilled is naturalness, if it is the settled, ordinary, unremarkable sense of something simply being true, then how do you find that feeling when your current reality is sitting right in front of you telling you otherwise? How do you feel free when the evidence of the limitation is still there? How do you feel loved when the absence is still what you wake up to? How do you feel like the version of you who has what you want when everything in your physical environment is still organized around the version who does not? This is where most people get stuck. And the reason they get stuck is not a lack of discipline. It is not a lack of belief. It is a misunderstanding of what is actually blocking the feeling, because it is not the outer reality that is in the way. It is the habit of treating the outer reality as the final word on what is true. Think of a person sitting in a room with unpaid bills on the table in front of them. They close their eyes. They try to feel financially free, and the bills are still there. Not just physically. They are present in the room as a feeling, as a weight, as the ambient frequency of the space. And every time the person reaches for the feeling of freedom, the awareness of the bills pulls them back, so they assume the bills are blocking the feeling. They assume they cannot access the state until the outer reality gives them permission. But the bills are not the obstacle. The habit of looking at the bills and calling them the truth is. The moment you accept that the outer world is not the cause of your inner state but the reflection of it, something shifts, not in your circumstances, in your relationship to them. You stop waiting for the outer world to change first. You stop asking it for permission to feel differently, and you turn your attention to the only place where the feeling of the wish fulfilled actually lives. Inside. Now this is where it gets precise, because most people who understand this still make one critical error. They try to feel the wish fulfilled from inside their current state, reaching upward toward the desired feeling, straining toward it, holding it by force against the pull of everything their senses are reporting. And that effort, however sincere, is still a signal of distance, still a signal of reaching. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is not accessed by reaching up, it is accessed by dropping down, below the conscious noise, below the comparing and the measuring and the constant evaluation of whether the shift is happening. into a layer of yourself that is deeper than your current circumstances and older than your current story. A layer that does not know what the outer world looks like today. A layer that does not consult your bank account or your relationship status or the evidence sitting on the table in front of you before it decides what is true. That layer is always there. It is always accessible. And Neville pointed to it consistently when he described the state akin to sleep. Think about the specific window just before you fall asleep, the moment when the day is releasing its grip, when the thoughts begin to slow, when the comparing and evaluating that runs almost constantly during waking hours starts to go quiet. In that specific state, something changes in the quality of your inner experience. The critical mind, the part that immediately measures every feeling against the current outer reality and finds it wanting, begins to relax. And in that relaxation, something becomes possible that is almost impossible in full waking consciousness. You can hold a feeling without immediately challenging it. You can inhabit a state without the conscious mind immediately cross-referencing it against your circumstances and returning a verdict of false. This is why Neville placed such extraordinary emphasis on that hypnagogic window. Not because the drowsy mind is more powerful, but because the conscious resistance drops away, the comparing stops. The critical faculty that has been trained to treat the outer world as the ultimate authority on truth goes temporarily offline. And in that silence, the subconscious becomes directly accessible. Not through effort, through surrender, through the simple willingness to let the outer world stop being the loudest thing in the room. And this points to something essential about how the feeling of the wish fulfilled actually works. It is not a feeling you produce. It is a feeling you allow. It is not something you build from the outside in, assembling the right thoughts in the right order until the feeling finally arrives as a result. It is something that is already present, at a level beneath the noise of your current circumstances, waiting for you to stop arguing with it. And when you understand this, the practice changes completely. You stop trying to convince yourself, you stop trying to override the evidence, you stop reaching across the gap, and you begin, instead, to drop, to go below the surface of the current state, to find the place inside you that already knows. Think of a method actor preparing to play a king. They do not walk onto the stage and try to feel like a king from the outside in. They do not look at their costume and say, "Now I will feel royal." They find the feeling first. They locate it in the body, in the quality of the breath, in the way the weight settles in the spine, in the particular quality of attention that belongs to someone who has never doubted their own authority. They establish the feeling internally before they take a single step, and then they walk out. And everything that follows, every line, every movement, every interaction with every other actor on that stage, flows from that prior internal establishment. The feeling does not follow the performance. The feeling precedes it. The performance is simply what the feeling looks like when it moves through a body in the world. That is what living from the end means. Not pretending, not performing. Establishing the feeling first, internally, genuinely, and then allowing everything that follows to be an expression of it. The outer reality does not need to cooperate for this to begin. It does not need to confirm the feeling before you are allowed to feel it. The feeling comes first. The outer world is always second, always, without exception. And the moment you begin to feel from that place, the moment you stop waiting for permission and simply inhabit the state that is already available to you, the signal your subconscious is receiving changes. Not because you changed your circumstances, because you changed the frequency from which you are living. And the world, which has always been listening, begins to respond to the new signal. Quietly, without announcement. The way it always has. Not because you performed the feeling perfectly. Not because you held it without a single moment of doubt, but because you chose, even briefly, even imperfectly, to feel from the inside of the thing rather than toward it. And that choice, repeated, accumulated, lived in the ordinary moments when no one is watching, is what the subconscious finally accepts as home. There is one more thing that needs to be said, and it is the most honest part of all of this. There will be moments when the feeling will not come, not because you are doing it wrong, not because you are incapable, not because the method has failed you or you have failed the method. but because something real is present. Grief, fear, the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from wanting something for a long time and watching the outer world remain unchanged. And in those moments, when you sit down to find the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and what rises to meet you is not peace but pain, not certainty, but the raw awareness of how much you still want this, a question arrives. Does the pain mean I am not ready? Does the grief mean I am disqualified? Does the fact that I cannot feel the wish fulfilled right now mean that something is broken in me that cannot be fixed by any method, however carefully applied? This is the most vulnerable place in the entire practice. And it is the place where most people quietly give up, not with drama, not with a decision, but with a slow withdrawal, a gradual return to the familiar weight of the old state, because the pain felt too real to work around, and the feeling they were reaching for felt too far away to find. But here is what is true about that moment. The feeling of the wish fulfilled was never meant to sit on top of your pain. It was never meant to replace what is real. It was not designed to be a performance of happiness worn over the surface of genuine difficulty. Because the subconscious sees through surfaces, it always has. And a feeling of the wish fulfilled that is performed over unacknowledged grief is not the wish fulfilled. It is a mask, and masks do not reach the subconscious. They stay at the surface, where the conscious mind can admire them, but the deeper self remains completely untouched. Think of someone who has been waiting a long time, not weeks, years. They have wanted something with a consistency that has quietly shaped the entire architecture of their inner life. And the wanting has been accompanied over time by something heavier, a tiredness that is not physical, a grief that has no clean edges, the specific ache of a person who has believed and doubted and believed again so many times that they are no longer sure what they feel. When that person tries to access the feeling of the wish fulfilled, they do not find peace waiting for them. They find the full weight of the journey, and the instruction to feel the wish fulfilled can land in that moment as cruelty, as one more thing they are apparently failing at. But this is the misunderstanding. The feeling of the wish fulfilled does not require the absence of pain. It requires something deeper than pain, something that exists at a layer of the self that the pain is sitting on top of, not inside. Think of a tree in a storm. Look at the branches. They are moving violently. The leaves are tearing. Everything visible is in motion, in chaos, in the visible struggle of something being tested. And if you only watched the branches, you would assume the tree was in danger. You would assume the violence of the surface was the full truth of what was happening. But go further down, below the trunk, below the surface of the earth, into the root system that no one sees, and no one photographs, and no storm has ever reached. There it is, completely still, not fighting the storm, not trying to calm the branches, not waiting for the wind to stop before it decides to hold, simply holding, already, without effort, without the storm's permission, anchored in something that the storm does not have access to, because the storm only exists at the level of the visible, and the root lies beneath visibility entirely. And because of that stillness below, the tree survives what would otherwise destroy it, not through resistance, through depth. The feeling of the wish fulfilled is the root, not the branches. It does not ask you to stop the storm. It does not ask you to pretend the branches are still. It asks you only to find the part of you that the storm cannot reach, the part that knows, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, with the specific certainty of something that does not require the outer world to confirm it before it agrees to be true. That is the layer the feeling lives in, and it is accessible even in the middle of the storm, even when the branches are tearing, even when the grief is real and the exhaustion is real, and the distance between where you are and where you want to be feels as wide as it has ever felt. The root is still there. It has always been there, and finding it even briefly, even for the length of a single breath taken from that depth, sends a signal to the subconscious that no amount of surface performance ever could, because it is real. It is not manufactured. It is not worn over the pain. It is found beneath it, and the subconscious, which has been listening to every signal you have ever sent, knows the difference instantly. This is the feeling Neville was pointing to. Not a technique. Not a daily practice performed correctly. A way of being. A quality of inner life that becomes available when you stop asking the outer world for permission to know what you know. Think of a seed in the ground. It does not wait for sunlight before it begins. The process of becoming is already underway in the dark, in the cold, in the invisible silence beneath the surface, where nothing appears to be happening and everything actually is, and the person who planted that seed does not dig it up every morning to check. They do not demand visible evidence before they continue to tend the ground. They trust what they cannot see because they know what they placed in the earth. That trust. That quiet, unannounced, undefended knowing that something is already growing. Even when the surface shows nothing, is the feeling of the wish fulfilled in its purest and most powerful form. Not hope, not belief as an act of will. Knowing. The kind of knowing that does not need to announce itself, that does not need agreement, that does not tremble when the outer world is slow to catch up. That simply holds, the way a root holds, beneath the storm, beneath the noise, beneath everything the world can see and measure and report back to you. You already know, you have always known, and that knowing, held quietly, lived in the ordinary moments between the rituals, breathed into the body in the dark before sleep, carried without announcement through the days that look exactly like the days before them, is the signal your subconscious has been waiting for. Not the performance of certainty, the real thing, quiet, settled, already home. The wish is fulfilled. It has always been fulfilled. You are simply learning to feel what was already true.